Hey everyone, welcome back. Yes, I agree. Cathode Current is busted. If anything, when I first saw this augment on DevStream, I joked to chat about how this was essentially the unnerfing of Gyre. At launch, her 4 caused lightning strikes with no cooldown. This led to some interesting builds and interactions. Then she was fixed to limit 2 lightning strikes per 1 second. Cathode Current is a controlled version over the original interaction. This is still extremely powerful, because the more times you kill, the more times the surviving enemies get hit by lightning. And because kills from Cathode Current can also trigger Cathode Current, this causes a positive feedback loop when you have enough raw ability damage, scaling akin to Sobek's acid shells. On top of this, strength both affects the raw damage of Rotorswell discharges as well as the amount of critical chance Gyre's ability gets. This grants Rotorswell's individual discharges pseudo-quadratic damage scaling, since the raw damage Rotorswell does is multiplicative to crit chance. Because the amount of crit sustained scales per enemy killed, and every discharge can chain up to 5 nearby enemies, the amount of hits sustained, so long as you keep killing enemies, is quadratic up to 5 enemy crowds. It levels out to linear after that. Since the damage of individual discharges scales pseudo-quadratic to strength, and the actual number of hits in a crowd is also pseudo-quadratic, Cathode Current has exponential scaling. This is the reason why Cathode Current feels so powerful and overwhelming. In fact, I was maintaining roughly 130 to 140 kpm on the builds I showcased today. It truly is the unnerfing of Gyre. From 0 to hero. While she did work in the past, she was problematic due to no consistent way to apply DPS and no way to consistently crowd control. It also means you no longer have to deal with the long cast animation of her 4, since Cathode Current adds the duration extension from Cathode Grace to it. But everyone knows that Gyre needs Armor Strip to do proper work on Steel Path, because while red crits are pretty, they are nothing without the raw damage to back them up. Abilities cannot be modded for multi-shot, bonus crit chance beyond Gyre's passive, or be given banes outside of specific interactions, and are thus much weaker than weapons. Cathode Current gets around this with the sheer exponential scaling of damage and hits. Coil Horizon lets the electric procs also cross-link for ridiculous damage on every body part due to ragdoll physics, and works perfectly without Armor Strip. But if you want that juicy tile cleaning newt without being forced to spam Coil Horizon constantly, Armor Strip is the only option. Of course, as you've seen, Pillage and Terrify are the popular options. Pillage works on Acolytes, strips both shields and armor, status cleanses and regenerates shields when it works. Combined with a shield gating setup, you both get all shields on cast and even more on return, making it basically impossible for enemies to kill you outside of Toxin. You can also uncast Pillage to make it come back sooner, but it requires 400 strength. I did have a corrosive projection version, but it ironically made building for Pillage extremely difficult and ended up costing even more mod slots, so we are not using corrosive projection today. Terrify only costs 167 strength, but does not work on Acolytes and only strips armor. It is also notably more expensive to cast. However, unlike Pillage that has a loose line of sight check, Terrify goes through walls. Cathode Current related Rotorswell discharges also go through walls. For survivability reasons, I find Pillage is easier to use in Endurance. The naturally forced higher strength also makes the discharge hit a lot harder for faster kills at level 9k. But for base Steel Path, Terrify and Pillage are interchangeable on Gyre's builds. Use whatever feels more comfortable to you, as Terrify offers certain pros that even Pillage cannot counter. We will be considering solo play and group play setups today, as well as an alternative modding where appropriate. Every single build today is focused around shield gating, because you're spamming your Armor Strip ability to farm kills. You're also stun locking enemies with electric proc, so it is honestly a lot more difficult and unnecessary to make a health tanking build. The estimated Armor Strip casting frequency on this setup is every 3 to 4 seconds. If you're casting less often than this, keep in mind you can get away with less energy generation, for example, skipping Energize or Equilibrium, or bringing only Archon Stretch plus Zeneric, and skipping both Equilibrium and Energize. You also need the correct stats. While on Volt and other AoE frames, range being more important than strength, it is the opposite on Gyre. Strength is infinitely more important than range. This is because the raw damage of Rotorswell discharges is rather low. It only deals its damage once per discharge. You're also fully mobile. Volt, on the other hand, continuously does his ability damage across every tick because it is not a true electric proc, and is locked in place every time he casts. Gyre needs enough strength to supercharge the exponential scaling from Rotorswell. The damage will not propagate unless you land kills, so I'll be listing Pillage builds first with solo and team play, then Terrify with solo and team play. Let's look at Gyre. Here is our Pillage solo build. For every single setup today, Cathode Grace is the last ability you cast. This is because it has low activation duration for you to get kills and start stacking it. Whether you cast Pillage or Rotorswell first is irrelevant, but do keep in mind your energy bar is only 240. You can fix this with the Archon Shards if you want, or you can drop Augur Reach for even just a normal flow is enough. If you're willing to camp an energy pad at the start of the mission, you have enough to get the build going even without increasing energy max. You should never, ever have to cast your 3 and 4 again unless you fall off the map or die. Keep in mind Cathode Grace stays active when you down. The 175 range reaches 140 kills per minute on Steel Path, whereas the 145 range version if you want to run Prime Flow reaches 120 kpm. Casting Pillage with Brief Respite plus at least one Augur mod, including if it's on your pistol, regenerates over 131 shields on this build at 45 efficiency. With the Decay Dragon Key, this means you reset full shield gate on cast and get even more when Pillage returns after 1.45 seconds. Rolling Guard is only here to remove status effects, or iframe if a problematic Acolyte shows up. Equilibrium to turn all those health orbs into energy, and Energize. Molt Augmented is required to hit 400 strength on the setup. I'm combining with Matterized Sling Strength plus 40% and plus 50% casting speed from Power Transfer. Since the setup has well over 120 kpm, it only takes the first 2 or 3 minutes of the mission to fully max out Augmented and full strip with a single Pillage cast. Because Cathode Current scaling is so ridiculous, this hardly matters when you only strip 92% armor and shields per cast when you first load in. I have one red Archon shard equipped for plus 10% strength to allow us to reach the 400% strength benchmark today. For group play, I would recommend swapping Augur Reach for prime continuity and consider bringing 2 Azure Archon shards for energy max. This is because it is more difficult to land kills in squads with them going around splitting up and destroying everything. More duration gives Cathode Grace more leeway on initial cast, and more bonus duration on kills, making it much easier to maintain your 3 and 4 active forever when farming kills. For our Terrify solo build, remember Cathode Grace is always the last ability you cast when setting up. There are 2 versions for solo. Either run Fleeting Expertise or run Streamline. Fleeting only grants you a 3.2 seconds window to start killing when you activate Cathode Grace, whereas Streamline gives you an 8 seconds window. Use whatever you want. Fleeting makes it easier to spam Terrify as needed since duration is only really relevant for landing your first kills. As the KPM is 120 or higher, this means at least 2 kills per second. Even at 40 duration, Cathode Grace will add 2.4 seconds more duration per second. At 100 duration, it will add 6 seconds more duration per second. This build is also tuned to restore all shields per Terrify cast even with fleeting, so long as you are using Brief Respite and at least one Augur mod with a Decay Dragon Key, including Augur mods on your pistol. The Terrify build has slightly less KPM than Pillage at 130 instead of 140, due to stragglers outside of Rotorswell's chain range running off. This is not a huge issue as the vast majority of enemies are stun up with electric procs and you're highly mobile, foregoing the need for using Creeping Terrify. Energize is still required to sustain the economy alongside Equilibrium. If you choose to use Streamline instead of Fleeting Expertise, it is strongly recommended to run Archon Stretch to compensate. The Terrify Gyre builds today do not need any kind of Archon shards whatsoever. This is the benefit of a lower strength requirement build. It is perfect for more budget builds where you lack access to Archon hunts, or just want a no-nonsense build with instant crowd control. You have slightly lower KPM, but you don't have to worry about Pillage not crowd controlling, nor need to debate how to increase your energy max. In exchange, you do not have status cleanse and cannot strip Acolytes for endurance runs. Therefore, while Pillage always performs better, Terrify is easier to use at base Steel Path. For a team setup on Terrify, only use the Streamlined version. Do not use Fleeting Expertise. You probably noticed I was going around just shooting my Epitaph with primers instead of actually DPSing with a weapon. This is because fully stripped enemies are easy to kill with Rotorswell's natural electric shock fields. Of course, you can bring a DPS weapon, but it is unnecessary outside of endurance because Cathode Current destroys all trash fodder, Xmas Overguard, and even fully stripped Acolytes. If you're using Terrify, bring a weapon for Acolytes or bring a Vastilok to armor strip them, but otherwise this is a viral electric Epitaph. Electric this time instead of radiation because electric procs on enemies increase critical chance of Gyre's abilities. This is her passive. Just make sure to have at least one Augur mod on here for set bonus if you aren't using an Augur on Gyre builds that I showcased earlier. If you're using Terrify, then you can bring something to kill the Acolyte. If you want to be an ability nuking purist, then the Vastilok is also perfect for stripping armor off instead of killing them directly. Just pat them over to some enemies nearby, kill the enemies, and the sheer amount of lightning strikes will kill the Acolyte off instantly. Pile on attack speed and shattering impact. It's all you need. Acolytes barely have base armor, so a single shot or two will remove it all. Panzer is the same build as always. It doesn't even really matter here since everything is stun locked. Martyr to keep you alive, Devolution to save itself, Radar, and Vacuum. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible like I've done with the Citrine's Last Wish update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You won't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.